Thanks for coming in, James.
Morning, Nick.
Good morning to you, sir. When we hear from the Defence Secretary, John Healy, saying British forces have this evening played their part in attempts to prevent further escalation, I appreciate there's some details you probably can't share, but what can you tell us that means?
Well, not only can I not share, but I don't know is the honest answer.
But in past events?
Well, I mean, so when this happened, or when Iran launched a major attack 6 months or so ago, the UK, alongside the US, the Jordanians, the Saudis, sought to defeat that air attack. Now, I made the point at the time, I think even on your show, Nick, that wasn't really a defence of Israel. That was a measure taken against a risk of uncontrolled escalation. And I suspect that the UK sees its role in defeating Iranian air attacks onto Israel as not just an act of solidarity with Israel, but as a necessary measure in order to stop an escalation trajectory that quickly goes out of control and we end up with a full-scale regional war.
I haven't spoken to you since this latest escalation. What have you learnt about the region? What have you learnt about the two sides, you could argue the 3, 4, 5 sides involved, over the last few weeks?
Well, look, I've been surprised at the ingenuity of Israeli and the patience of Israeli special operations. So things like the pagers and the walkie-talkies.
We know it's them.
I mean, it looks like it's got all the hallmarks.
I mean, if not who?
And that's an amazing bit of long-term military tactical planning. But it also has an incredible effect on the networks within Hezbollah and Hamas. All of a sudden, they start to doubt the security of their networks. They worry that the Israelis are tracking them, and of course, they worry that the Israelis have got novel methods to target them directly. The other big lesson is that Iran, right from the beginning of this, I remember sort of hearing all sorts of discussion when I was in government about the risk of Iran lighting up its proxies and Iran becoming directly involved. And the Iranians are capable, right? They've got a whole load of capabilities, either through their proxies around the entire region or within their own arsenal, degraded admittedly because they've given a lot of their cruise missiles, for example, to the Russians for the war in Ukraine. But nonetheless, I would have expected Iran to have done much more. The fact that Iran hasn't just says to me that A, they might not be as capable, but B, they are incredibly nervous that if they go for it and they fail, and I suspect they think that Israel probably has got the better of them, that could be quite existential for the Iranian regime.
Some commentators are saying that this is almost a golden opportunity to eliminate Hezbollah and possibly other terror organisations. Would you concur?
I mean, I suspect that's how Netanyahu sees it. That if once the ball got rolling on the back of the attacks almost a year ago from Hamas in southern Israel, that the opportunity for Israel to just go for this and finish Hamas militarily, finish Hezbollah militarily, and try to change the paradigm around their security. Whether or not you agree with that discuss, there'll be plenty of people itching to call into LBC this morning to say that they don't. But I suspect that will be the thinking within Netanyahu's close team.
What does the British government need to do next?
Well, look, it is doing what it should be doing, frankly. And look, now that I'm not a minister, I am free to say, when the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary and the Prime Minister of the day tell you to leave a country, leave the blooming country. The number of times when, as a minister, I had to sit there in the MOD on a media round and you would challenge me about why we weren't getting all of these people out of some country that was in the midst of a crisis that we couldn't control. And the Foreign Office travel advice had been, don't be there for 6 months or a year or so beforehand. So the first priority of the UK government is the front of the passport
staff. And they are doing that, in fairness.
Yeah, they are. And all I'm doing is providing some solidarity as a former minister who's been there and just saying to your listenership in Beirut, take the advice and leave now. What they will be concerned of more generally in the business of the National Security Council and COBRA will be the risk of escalation, what that means to the wider UK interest in the region, what the UK options are alongside allies, and they will be calibrating very closely within what's called the Quad, Germany, France, UK, US, in order to make sure that we're in step with our allies. They will be worrying about the consequence of geopolitical crisis around key choke points like the Straits of Hormuz, the southern Red Sea, what that means for global supply chains. And as you heard from the commentary before we started talking, Nick, they'll be worried about what sort of it means for the terror threat at home or indeed to UK nationals overseas.
You will have spoken with your counterpart in the Israeli government on many occasions. When the IDF say their operations in Lebanon will be limited and targeted, and they want to be there for days or weeks, not months, do you believe them?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the Israeli armed forces are often sort of seen as a unsympathetic bogeyman in the British media. The reality is that they are one of the most sophisticated armed forces on earth.
Even in Gaza?
Well, look, I mean, the capabilities that they hold are immense, and their ability to target very precisely is world leading. Whether or not they've used those tactics correctly in Gaza, discussed. There is a challenge in trying to get after people who are willing to hide within a civilian population and do so very deliberately. But I think that the IDF does have the ability to run a very discreet operation in southern Lebanon. I also think that they will be incredibly aware of their license to operate in Washington. I think Netanyahu, to a degree, will just go it alone and do what he wants to do. But I do think they ultimately know that they've got some space that Washington allows them, and if they go too far, that license gets removed.
Last point to explore. A couple of weeks ago, Benjamin Netanyahu said that the British government's decision to suspend some arms sales to Israel was misguided. Was he right? And do you think the British government might be regretting the look of that now?
Yeah, I mean, I did think that was a mistake. I understood that, David Lammy's argument that he had been through all of the licenses, the lawyers had identified a relatively small number that they felt did cross a line. I think that sort of legal advice, having seen it myself, is always very finely balanced and ultimately leaves lots of space for political
interpretation. James.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it leaves lots of space for political judgment. And when you look at who the two key geopolitical audiences in that decision were, the actual audience for the government was the Labour left. But if you look at who the two geopolitical audiences are, they are Israel and they are the United States. Now, Israel was obviously going to be annoyed, but I think to pull the rug from under Biden when he is under similar pressure from the left in the US was a mistake. And I also think that it bleeds across into US reluctance over being able to target US donated systems into Russian soil. I think that the fact that we have pulled the rug from under them on Israeli licensing weakens our position in trying to influence in Washington to get the other key thing we need at the moment.
So finally, Netanyahu said it undermined Israel. I sense you might concur with that.
Yeah, I do. Look, having come on and made an entirely bipartisan point about how well they're doing in their evacuation advice, I did think that was a real mistake and will have weakened our hand in Washington.